tomorrow and yesterday. She's been in everyone, in every way.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Stench of Truth here at my new home on the Inception Radio Network. Now, for everybody who wants to find out about Jay Weidner, well, you can just go to jayweidner.com, which is his main website. He runs a store called Sacred Mysteries, which has material by him and by other researchers, lots of DVDs, and there's a lot of material on the website. There are interviews that are available with him. There are articles that are written by Jay talking about many different subjects. Some of them related to alchemy, which is one of the key things that he started into this sort of quest, I guess you could say, that he's been on, looking at alchemy and studying alchemy and the Cross of Henday, and then he has moved off into a lot of different directions since then. So check out jayweidner.com, and of course, as I noted earlier, one of the biggest things that is driving interest in Jay Weidner's work today is the movie that he put together, the documentary about Stanley Kubrick and 2001, A Space Odyssey. And the shining and also the faking of the Apollo moon landing footage that we see. And I'm sure Jay will be quick to point out that he does, in fact, believe that the U.S. went to the moon, but that the imagery that we have been given by NASA is fake, or at least a good portion of it is. And perhaps he'll get into that a little bit more when we start to talk with him about that. I just watched Kubrick's Odyssey again today, and that's the name of the video itself. It's called Kubrick's Odyssey. It's from Sacred Mysteries, which is his web store. And the subtitle is Secrets Hidden in the Films of Stanley Kubrick, and this is part one, Kubrick and Apollo. And as I say, this also links up with The Shining, which is a very interesting and divergent story contained within this video, and it's a really amazing thing. I mean, regardless of what you think about the Apollo moon landings, when you look at this video, you will definitely be left scratching your head. There's no question about that, and I highly recommend it. So you can order that through his website, and anybody who's interested should definitely do that, because it is really a very well done documentary, and it puts things right out there and easily explains it all, and it's definitely will make you think. There's no question about that at all. So without any further ado, I think we'll bring our guest on the line, and we'll get into our discussion. Jay, are you there?
I am.
All right, that's great. Jay, first of all, I want to thank you for agreeing to do the show this evening. I just got finished, as I noted in the intro there, I just got finished watching Kubrick's Odyssey again, and I think you probably need to watch it more than once just to try to grasp some of the symbology that is in there, and to try to really grasp some of the ideas that you bring forth. But it's a really great piece of work, and I think that most people who have a look at Hollywood and the production, especially of certain directors and producers and even actors, one can see certain patterns of the release of information and things of this nature. So no one should be surprised that someone like Stanley Kubrick, who was a masterful director, would encode material within their films?
Well, I think the real thing that's happening here with Mr. Kubrick is that the question becomes, what does a guy with a 200 IQ do when he becomes bored with filmmaking? And I think that's what is actually driving a lot of the things that happened post-2001. And what you find is a puzzle left behind, created by a guy who had done everything that he wanted to do and was frankly bored. And so after Barry Lyndon, he went into a respite where he contemplated the very art of filmmaking. And after he came out of this research and development phase, he decided to create a film that would work on essentially be like a three-dimensional chess game. And there were many levels to the presentation, only one apparent to 99.99.9999% of the population. The rest, there was a small percentage who saw it, didn't really care for the film, but thought there was something going on, but they couldn't figure out what. And those people noticed things a little bit more maybe than others, but pretty much no one really understood what he was doing in The Shining. And once you begin to unlock that door, then it opens up a lot of other doors into the vast work that he was doing, and you know, draws up several questions as to what's the overarching theme of this whole thing. And, you know, I think the overarching theme that he's really trying to present is actually the plot of The Shining, and that is that we are living in a world which we do not suspect that there are spirits or demonic forces or alien forces, some kind of force that is invisible until it wants you to see it, and that it can jump into your body and inhabit you and make you change your behavior, want to kill your son, and that kind of thing. And he glommed on to that Stephen King idea. That's the idea that, you know, made him want the book. And though the rest of it was thrown in by him, only keeping that idea. And I think that idea is actually the intrinsic idea that lies behind everything of importance that Stanley Kubrick did.
Yeah, and I think that upon viewing the analysis that you do in Kubrick's Odyssey of the film The Shining, one can very easily come to that conclusion. You know, I remember when the film came out, there was such a hue and cry because it deviated so much from Stephen King's source material, the book itself, which I had read, of course, and was quite familiar with, being a fan of King for a long time. And as you pointed out, it is the differences between the work of King and the differences that Kubrick introduced into the film version that are the key aspects of the story that he's trying to tell.
Yeah, I like to say, you know, in pure Robert Anton Wilson twists of humor, that Kubrick faked the making of the Stephen King novel in order to show that he was involved in faking the moon landing footage. And I think that's the key. And this is exactly what a guy with a high IQ would be trying to do. He'd be trying to bury many levels of things inside the movie. So The Shining actually has many levels. I've really only hit one level in Kubrick's Odyssey, a very important level, but actually not the most important level. And that the next one will be coming out with the next level of what's in The Shining. And I think when that happens, there'll be some serious discussion breaking out quickly over it. But basically, you know, the idea is that Kubrick was Yeah, what's going on here, I think what we have to just accept is that the same group that runs the banking and the politicians runs Hollywood. And they are making movies that have a purpose. And, we can debate forever what those purposes are. And they have a group of filmmakers who do these things for them. And there's a message that's being attempted to get out. And each movie that I see has a big budget, I spend the first 15 or 20 minutes trying to figure out what the agenda of the movie is. Who made it? Why? What were they trying to say? Why would they put millions of dollars into this? And I think once you see that films are actually just propaganda, then you can begin to understand the world that Stanley found himself in. And so in these films, he had to hide the truth of what was really going on. And so in all the films that are post-2001 are concerned with what he has discovered about the people that are funding the movies. And I think that once you see that, you begin to understand that he's trying to tell us something of profound significance about our world and who we are and how we aren't really even what we think we are. We're just imprints from their media, and it's all carefully contrived. And the rabbit hole on that one runs really deep. And my only problem now is trying to figure out where to put the stop so I can actually finish the second film. The films are mostly done right now, but there's new information pouring in at a pretty rapid clip, so I'm having to regroup. But pretty much that's what he's trying to say in The Shining. And once you add the moon stuff in, you realize that what he had done is spent all those years making that movie. He was doing things that were way out there for a film maker of any sort. And this is what happens when you get a guy with the 200 IQ as a professional chess player who could have been one of the world's greatest chess players, who then goes into movies. This is what you get.
Yes, I can definitely see that, and I tend to do the same thing that you're talking about, Jay, whenever I see new movies come out, particularly ones that have, what would appear to be a surface agenda, like a lot of the recent alien invasion movies that we've seen that seem to have been hyped so much, like Battle L.A., and prior to that we had, what was that other one? I can't remember the name of it, but anyway, we've seen a couple of these alien invasion films that have come out, and of course, I think there is an agenda that's being pushed, and as you rightly observe, I think that it is it's a legitimate question to ask what that agenda is, because it's not altogether obvious. But I think that your particular analysis and the way that you break down the films and look at the symbolism and things of this nature kind of fits right in with your previous work and your presumably continuing work in Alchemy and the study of symbology in that regard. And, of course, that particular philosophical school, if we could put it in those terms, requires a great deal of symbology and understanding of symbolic relationships, because the material that you're dealing with is so dense with that. And have you found, like, your work in Alchemy to assist you greatly in your breaking down of the themes and the symbolism that you find within films and within media and other things that you notice today in our society?
Well, Carl Jung, the great psychologist, took a look at alchemical symbols, and although he had a rather superficial, in my view, point of view on what these symbols meant, he was astute enough to have discovered that there were frequent people with dreams would frequently have symbols that were obviously inside the alchemical artwork that he was referring to. And so he began to think that alchemy was really about psychological archetypal world which feeds into this reality. Now, his point of view is incredibly mundane, but he's onto the right thing. And the thing is that alchemy is not really about it's not really science. Alchemy is how do you apply an intuitive, almost meta-dimensional view to the mundane three-dimensional reality. And when you do that, you supersede language. And the only thing you have left to describe this profound point of view are symbols and possibly music. And so that becomes the language or the tapestry of the archetypal psychology of the collective unconscious. And so even if Kubrick didn't mean to put alchemical symbols into and all over the film 2001: A Space Odyssey, they're still there. He's still drawing on them. So to me, you could go to his library and not find one book on alchemy, and it wouldn't surprise me, although I have been told that, in fact, he read hundreds of books on alchemy. So it wouldn't surprise me because this stuff's just spouting out of us. It is what we are. And when the reason that I have been able to see this is because I tried to decipher the book Mystery of the Cathedrals by Fulcanelli, and in fact was trying to, in a way, disprove it and debunk it. And I didn't know that the book itself was crafted to take anyone who actually tried to understand the book would come out of it a completely changed person, almost an initiate. Now, I'm not saying I'm an initiate. I'm not, because I've never worked with any masters or anything. But I'm saying that that the book Mystery of the Cathedrals by the anonymous alchemist Fulcanelli is a carefully contrived book that, if you follow its prescription, will open up dimensional areas in your mind that, and in a sense, do the same thing that used to happen if you attended a mystery school, which no longer exist, or really, they no longer exist. So that was the intention. It was a person came out of hiding, and it was probably written by a group of people who understood exactly what they were doing. And so that's not a gift of mine. It's something that I got from learning how to walk around in the landscape of this odd parallel universe almost that situates itself right next to us in this society. And the people that occupy that universe speak in symbol and leave symbols behind. And there are others who aren't as smart, who never see anything. And then there's a few who notice things. And then there's a small percentage who actually can see the fingerprints of this kind of archetypal thing that is stamped itself across the mind of humanity. And if you know how to tap into it or how to watch it, well, then you can be vastly successful. And so I would even suggest that the people who make successful films, and I'm not going to name any names, have been through these kinds of schools.
So they use the symbology on purpose so that their films will be successful, because they know that the archetypes that they use are going to be things that people will gravitate to, because that's simply in the nature of the psychology of people, because they understand it so well. Is that what you're saying?
Bingo.
Yeah.
And but an astute person, a person with high IQ, is going to get really quickly bored with what you just said and go down and dig deep into the human collective through books, I would guess, and find the oldest ones you could, so you could find out what the human mind unscathed thought, unspun thought. This is what happens to you when you're really smart and you start running out of contemporary things. You realize that everything you're reading has been spun by political forces and monarchies and churches, and so you realize that everything you're being told is a big, huge crap of lies, and so you discard it and you keep going backwards. This happens with every single person who ever starts trying to work on.
Well, I've certainly come to that conclusion myself.
Yeah.
That in every way, what we're being presented with in all forms of media is nothing but propaganda of some fashion or another. Some of it will have some truth in it. In fact, most of it will probably have a little bit of truth in it. But the vast majority of it is going to be garbage and bunk. And what we're living.
The truth is the frosting on top of a big, huge cake, and you have no vitamins in it, and it's just there to make you fat. And that's how they dish it out. So there's enough truth there for you to eat it all and swallow the rest of it, but that's it. And you really just have to discard everything. And I think most intelligent people just begin discarding everything that they hear from everything that they see, and they go backwards. And you end up looking at things like the Nag Hammadi and things that have not been touched by anyone except for the person who intended to write it. And, a lot of this stuff got destroyed at the library at Alexandria, so there's not really all that much to read. And so you can go through this stuff pretty quick. And then if you keep going, you'll develop the sixth sense of knowing that if the material has been heavily suppressed, then you really want to read it as fast as possible. And so then you get into the Book of Enoch and a lot of other interesting things. And so that's pretty much probably exactly what Stanley did himself. And he ended up at Gnosticism. And he wanted to make a film about Gnosticism. And that's how he got started and how he got into this group of ex-German, ex-Nazi scientists and Arthur C. Clarke and the whole cadre of people that are behind, the power source of what he was doing to get 2001 done.
Well, I think, and you bring up a very good, to drop another name there, and that's Arthur C. Clarke, of course, intimately connected with 2001, also someone who is, you could either say eerily prophetic about what the future would hold for humanity, or maybe more rightly, one could say that he knew what would be in store for humanity for the future and was merely telling people what was to come because he had access to this information by whatever means.
5 years ago I would have said the former, but now I would say the latter. So it's, I now come to think that, no, these guys are like way, way, way ahead of us, and we haven't got a chance. And he knew about it, and Clarke is one of them. And Clarke is an incredibly intelligent guy, and really arguably the best science fiction writer that's ever lived, in my view. And but he was an odd guy, a strange guy, and I don't know. There's a lot of stuff in there.
Indeed, there is. And, you had mentioned Fulcanelli, and I just wanted to touch on him for a minute because you have made it clear several times during, interviews that you've done over the years that Fulcanelli and the Mystery of the Cathedrals was like a sort of jumping off point for you in your research and work in this particular area. And you had mentioned just in passing that you thought that the work was the result of a group of people. And that's what I was going to ask you. Had you come to any firm conclusions as to the identity of Fulcanelli, and if it was like a collaborative effort, are they the people that are given as the usual suspects in looking at who the possible writers of that book could have been?
Yeah, well, the thing is there's two questions really. One was who was Fulcanelli, and the second question is who wrote the book. And so I think the answer to the first question is that Fulcanelli could be, a number of 2 or 3, maybe 4 people that existed in the Paris esoteric scene of the 20s and 30s. And Pierre Dujols and Schwaller de Lubitsch are all candidates, and even his artist, Julien Champagne. There's theories about everybody. Okay.
Yes.
But really and truly, if you examine the story, what you get is that a group of guys, exuberant guys in their late 20s and early 30s, started meeting at a very, very dilapidated little dump in Paris once a week or so, maybe once a month, with someone who was teaching them, downloading very quickly a whole lot of stuff to them. And this would be in about 1921 to 1922, but very quickly. And then he disappeared. And he left behind these students. And these students went out into the world. And each one of them has their own trail leading them back to Fulcanelli. But the book itself was, I believe, given to Julian Champagne, and then he did the drawings under orders from whoever, and then the book was published. And the book was published with the intent and purpose of rewiring the brain so that the seeker could begin perceiving reality in a different way than we do, in a way that is actually the way the ancients were wired, and then in that you begin to see that there's a whole different world, a whole other universe of that's lying parallel to us, and that we're actually tapping all the time with our dreams and our ambitions and our plans. And what we're really doing is we're actually fabricating the future, and the future is a kind of a fabric that we can reach out with our hands and manipulate, and the whole thing is much different than we've been led to believe in our religions and our histories and our political systems. And the really smart people are the ones who follow alchemy. Leonardo da Vinci, Newton, and Carl Jung. And that's where the smart people always end up. So why wouldn't Kubrick? And so so that's the key to understanding it. And then you can understand, at a certain point that we're under a spell from high magicians almost, and the whole planet is under a spell. And that's another whole kind of backstory that Kubrick is always trying to tell us.
That's kind of what I believe as well. That there really is a literal spell being put on the people of the world in a very, very real and literal sense. It sounds to me as though you believe the work, The Mystery of the Cathedrals by Fulcanelli is almost a sort of an initiatic work itself. It's designed to maybe be a crash course for people to dive into this particular realm. And since you agree that is the case, then one could also very easily look at the film 2001: A Space Odyssey as an initiatic journey as well.
That's right. Advice for anyone who's thinking of reading the book, it's extremely difficult to read. And if you just spend your time and read it very slowly, you will eventually get it. But the key to understanding Mystery of the Cathedrals is that every time you come to a word that is italicized, you must Google that word and read everything you can on whatever subject matter that he's italicizing. Once you get done with that, and that's going to take you about 4 years, you will understand what's really going on. That's how it worked. It was a brilliant move. It was brilliant. It was a brilliantly contrived book by a group of people who knew that the old schools were being swept away by World War I, and it terrified this group of people, and so they got together and they contrived the book and released it and put it out as a way for guys like us to want maybe to understand the world in a different way.
To see behind the veil that people are trying to put over our eyes all the time with the propaganda and the spin machines that are running all the time.
Yes.
It really amazes me, Jay. You sound exactly like me when you're describing the reality that we live in today. And it's great when I come across someone who has a kindred opinion about that, because when I see things being presented to us as supposedly real events about our supposed reality, and I look at them on their face, and I can just completely toss them aside, knowing that they're totally bogus and false, and to see people just blindly accept this material given to them makes me cringe, quite frankly. But I have to realize that people have been so programmed over the years of their lives, from ever since they were born, to approach this reality from a certain perspective, and coming out of that sort of dream state is very difficult for people to achieve sometimes.
Well, the real point of the whole thing is that you are either dreaming, you are either weaving the dream, or you are caught in the currents of someone else's dream. And that's the first is a master of this world, and the second is a slave in this world. And that's what you have to ask yourself: Are you swimming in the dream that you created, or are you swimming in the dream of some other force? Maybe a force you had nothing to do with. Maybe a force that did it to you before you were conscious. Are you swimming in that force's dream? And I think the uneasy answer is that a vast percentage, super high percentage, are living in other people's dreams. And so the question is, well, if I'm living in somebody else's dream, how do I get out of that dream? I said, well, first off, cut the television off. You'll find out there's a whole different world. And I would limit my internet use to very, very small time of each day. And I would get out in nature, and I would start doing things like exercising and doing yoga and eating right. And you'll begin seeing that there's a different world. And begin reading things that you don't agree with. If you don't agree with a book, if you're at a bookstore and you see a book that looks like you absolutely do not want to read it, it's the worst book in the world, that's the book you should buy. Keep doing that. By the time you're done, you will understand everything.
That sounds like great advice. It really does. But it's also, just like all great advice, it's very difficult to take. It's a hard pill to swallow for people to really grasp the notion of what it is you're trying to say there, and why it's important for people to know. So you started off on your journey with the mystery of the cathedrals, and then you got on to the Cross of Henday. And this was a particular monument that's in, I'm trying to remember where that was. Where was that located? The cross itself? France. Yeah, that's in France. Yeah, that's where I thought. Yeah. And you had actually worked on decoding the symbolism of this particular cross. And that was probably one of the more significant pieces of work that you have done. Maybe you'd like to tell us a little bit about the Cross of Henday.
Well, it's certainly the longest investigation I ever did, and I'm thankful it's over, although it's had incredible implications for me for the rest of my entire year since I wrote the book with Vincent Bridges now, 13 years ago or whatever. And so basically the Cross of Henday is at the end of Mystery of the Cathedrals, and it's a really fascinating story of this little chapter that got added to a reprint of Mystery of the Cathedrals. And because, I kind of always look for things that are odd, I got intrigued with this new additional chapter, and I began reading it, and it was the end of the book, and I'd already figured out the rest of the book, and I was trying to understand this little chapter, and I just kept reading it, and then I realized that, this thing, if it was real, then it was amazing, and if it was a hoax, then I had to find out who did it. And so I reasoned at first it was all a hoax. The cross was a hoax, everything was a hoax. Well, that was my original thesis, and I kept trying to prove that to myself, but now I know none of it's a hoax. So I went to France, and I made sure it was real, and I looked at the erosion, and I saw that it was really old, and et cetera, et cetera. But as I began to decipher it through an esoteric point of view, I began to realize that it was really a monumental work of symbology in which a alchemical view, and by that I mean an ancient view, what you might even call a golden age view of the world, a long-term view of our world and what we are, is unveiled. And you look at the outer symbols and the words on it, you wouldn't think any of this, but once you begin and you put the key into the door and unlock it, everything begins tumbling out, and you begin understanding that planetary alignments and etheric forces and the center of the galaxy and the quality of time and how different ages have different kinds of time, which is really another important thing that the alchemists are trying to convey. It's just like different times of your life have different times, so too does different clusters of time have different qualities. So, so this brings in the whole astronomy, astrology aspect, and why they're watching the stars, not because they think that, there's some kind of thing that's going to happen when we change from one sign to another. It's because they know that there's a quality to each sign, and sometimes those qualities that come through the change of time, just like the change of seasons, sometimes you have to do things to make sure that some things aren't lost. So you store the apples in the cellar in the fall so you can eat them in the winter. And so the ancients, who were alchemists, realized that they had to leave behind things that would tell us the secrets that they knew in a time of storm and turmoil that they knew was coming, which is the times that we live in now. And so they left behind monuments, and the Cross of Henday is one of them. And they've been contrived, again, by this group that seeks to, they either have some kind of compassion for us, or it's all some kind of game of esoteric unveiling that is difficult to explain to anyone who hasn't really started going into it. But I guarantee once you get into it, you will see that we're surrounded everywhere, but especially in Europe, but in Washington, D.C. even, we're surrounded by things that are symbolic, and they mean something, and they're real, and there's forces that understand this, and these forces are profound, and they're strong, and they're not in our interests. I'm only talking about a small group of guys and probably girls, who feel compassion for us for some reason. But there are other parts of this group who have no compassion for us, and it's clear from the films of Stanley Kubrick that they seek to do damage to us.
Are we talking about human forces here, or are we talking about something else?
Well, I mean, that's $1 million question. I mean, I as I look at it, because I look at the arc of it, I'm what Kubrick is saying is no, they're not human. But they can appear as human, and this is the basic theme of The Shining. That there's these forces that you can't see, that they can get into you, and they can change your behavior. And if you let enough of them in, they will finally manifest. When you turn totally and completely into their poison, when you're poisoned by them, almost like a parasitical force, then you can see these forces finally in wherever they are manifesting. And they're, and these are the rich people of The Shining. And so, it looks, like it's, in the end, it's almost very similar to the book, The Mind Parasites, by, I think it was Colin Wilson, novel. It's almost like that more, is what I think Kubrick's final conclusions were. But there is an unmistakable sex magic quality to this whole entire edifice, which he was also trying to convey, but failed, I think, ultimately to do that one.
Well, I think you you sort of illustrate that a little bit in some of the comments that you've made regarding the ill-fated movie Eyes Wide Shut, which has sort of got into the idea of the sex magic angle of these elite groups and the importance of it in their rites and rituals, and perhaps we'll get to discuss that in a little bit. But I wanted to ask you, since you did mention about the change of times, and one thing that I've noticed in the works that you put forward is, in particular, a lot of the lecture presentations that you have on your YouTube site, the quality of time itself almost being a I don't know exactly how to put it, that time is mutable in some fashion, maybe even in like an alchemical fashion, that the perception of time or time itself can be changed or transformed or in some way altered. And that's and somehow that can affect humanity and people's evolutionary journey, if you want to call it that. I mean, I don't know what kind of terminology you would think would be appropriate for that particular idea, but would you care to comment on that?
Well, it's like imagine, you have a line that goes from A to B, flat line, right? Well, that's our time. That's how we go. That's how we walk from A to B, right? But there's also a parallel time, and it's what I call orthogonal time. And that's where you walk along from point A to point B, and all of a sudden you take a right turn, and you suddenly have created a point C just by taking the right turn. Okay, you've moved orthogonally. So you're in the same time, but now you're moving in a different direction within that same time. That's shamanic time, or what I also call polychronic universe, a universe of many times. So you can come back to the same spot you were and go on to be. That's about the best I can give you on that. But it's not a straight line. So just let me take this one more step. But making it a straight line is a mistake, because that's what we do, because we're all crunched in our modern symbols. We can't think any other way. The universe and nature do not move in straight lines. So instead of thinking that once you've got the idea of moving from A to B, and then you have the ability to suddenly leap off the line and create C, and maybe D, E, F, G, and H, and come back to B and keep going, once you realize that, then you can try to imagine it is actually a swirl or a vortex, and you're able to. So you're spinning down a vortex, which is what time is actually more like, and you're able to angle your way out of the vortex into other aspects and areas of time as yet unexplored, unless you know what you're doing, and then come back to that original vortex, catch it right where you left it, and off you go with your life. And this is what happens to people in shamanic experiences. This is what happens to people in deep meditation. This is what happens in the dream world. This is what happens in any kind of induced kind of state. We call it the spiritual world or whatever, but really it's this unexplored, undiscovered country which lies outside the flow of time. And that's the key to understanding it. And so time has a fabric, and that fabric, I try to show it in my article, The Topology of Time. The fabric of time is similar, and this is all symbolically, okay? No one can actually prove anything I'm saying here. I'm trying to show you from an alchemical, symbolic point of view. Time is a toroid, or what you would call, like a donut of light or energy. It's a fourth-dimensional object. And the toroid goes, the energy goes around the outer skin of this donut-shaped object, and it spins down into the hole in the center, and it goes out the other end. And so the force lines are, in a sense, infinite. And wherever you are on the skin of that donut, the crust of that donut, you're going to have different kinds of force lines. If you're out near the equator, the force lines are going to be wide apart and moving very slowly. If you're out down in the very center of the funnel, where the vortex coming in from the top goes down into the eye hole at the very center and then has to come through the other side like a tornado of time, then time is very different. Unfortunately for us, we're almost at the very, very tight end of the vortex of this time bubble, and what that means is that time is faster. Every second is faster. Every minute is faster. Every month is faster. Every year is faster, because you're going down the vortex. Each spin is quicker in the time vortex. And unfortunately, that's where we are right now, and that's why. So we're almost guaranteed a screw up because our reaction times are being slowed. You understand what I mean? We don't have
Yes,
enough time to
absolutely.
react anymore. This is why Titanic is the biggest, or was the biggest hit of all time, because it's all about cutting your reaction time, not having enough time to properly react, and everybody dies. And it's the story of our age in a way. So we're approaching this time thing, and it's going to get very interesting. And you should be seeing a lot of sudden enlightenments and sudden madness.
Is this? Do you view this as a cyclic thing that humanity goes through over periods of time, much the same way as the ages of the ancient Indians and in many of the other different cultures around the world that talk about the different ages that we've been through, like the golden and the silver and the bronze and the iron and all that sort of thing? Yes. Yeah.
The golden age is when you come out of the vortex, the eye of the very center of your donut of time, your time donut, right? The very center of the hole. That's where we're almost at right now. When you come out the other side, the time starts. Then the quality of time is now. Each second is shorter than the next one. Each minute is shorter than the one coming after it. So each minute, each day, each year. Understand? And so it's a completely different quality of time. And all of a sudden, you not only have more than enough time, you're so far ahead of the game, you don't even have to work. That really you explained that very succinctly, and I think that most people who are living right now would agree that it seems as though, at least on some level, even if it's only subconsciously, that time is moving quicker than it has before. It's not just some kind of airy-fairy alchemical, this guy's fried his brains on Mercury poisoning kind of thing. It's just Google NASA, sun, time speeding up, 2011. That should do it. And you will find numerous articles about NASA admitting that there's particles coming out of the sun they've never seen before. They're very worried about them. And these particles have the ability to actually change carbon-14. So now they have to throw out all the carbon-14 agent, because now they found out that actually carbon-14 does change. And at the end of the article, keep reading because it gets better and better. At the end of the article, NASA admits, quote, that these strange particles are causing time to speed up in our local neighborhood.
Well, I had actually read the article you're talking about where they posited the idea of an unknown particle coming from the sun, which does affect carbon dating methods. Whereas previously, for those who are unfamiliar with the idea, the notion of carbon-14 was that, like all known isotopes of any element, it has a certain decay rate, which is supposedly immutable. It doesn't change over time. So, in other words, if you see something that has a certain amount of carbon-14 in it, then you can extrapolate back to find out how old it is, because they know how quickly it will disintegrate over a certain period of time. And in fact, if that changes, then you can no longer do this. And using it as a dating method for archaeological findings or anything of this nature would then become invalid. And that is, of course, a very major thing to come out with, and it does bear a great deal of scrutiny from scientists certainly, but even by people in general, to understand that it's one of the very basic tenets of belief. The immutability of this particular tenet of scientific thought is no longer true.
Well, indeed, and there's a lot more of those truths that need to come crashing down as quickly as possible, and that would be great when they do. But, the thing is that this all takes it back to my original research on the Cross of Henday, whose major feature is a symbolic picture of an angry sun with wild, crazy eyes. And it's the side that's facing the public square there in the little town. And so you have to ask yourself, well, the whole thing of this Cross of Henday is it's saying that the sun goes through some kind of cycle, and this cycle is associated with the turning of the ages, which is what I just described to you. Mm-hmm. And that it is actually probably the sun, by the way, that's causing this because of the magnetic dynamics within the sun casting out a huge magnetic field, which is really the skeleton. The magnetic field of the Earth and the sun are the skeleton of this larger domain of a higher dimensional flow. So there's a huge donut shape that goes around the sun, and the sun is in the very center of the whole where everything's compressed. And that's why the sun doesn't burn itself up, not for the reasons that you learn in astronomy class. But I digress. I don't want to get everybody mad at me. But this is just a new way of looking at the world. This is how the alchemists viewed the world. Atoms are not atoms. Atoms, not like we've been told, although there's vast similarities to the truth. What atoms are little tiny donut-shaped vortices, and they have different sizes and spin ratios, and those are what makes up this world. And it's all, and how one has to remember that this shape is the center of all creation. It's the center of everything. It's why galaxies look like they do. It's why humans have to do yoga and things to keep their spine straight, because the spine is the very center compressed area of your own vortex, your own magnetic donut, torsion field, whatever you want to call it. And so this is the secret that no one is allowed to say, because for some reason, this is the secret they never want anyone to understand. And so this is what's going on in the solar system, is that the sun is beginning to change. That's because the torsion field that is around the sun, of which we are right in the center of it, is changing. And that means that we're moving into another quality of time.
And part of that transition, of course, as you noted, is the changing nature of time itself and the speeding up of time, and of course, as you talked about, moving outside of the linear flow of time, being compressed down in the very center of the vortex towards the end of the particular age that we're in, it would make it much more difficult for people to do that. Much like spinning down a black hole, the closer you get to the actual hole itself, the more difficult it is for you to actually veer off your course. So
yeah, that's what I mean by about the ultimate. I'm being very nice here. Screw up that's coming. It's like
yes.
it doesn't take a stage magician or a premonition or anything to predict that this is going to lead to some incredible screw up. If Fukushima isn't it already, we don't know. So I don't want to bring bad news. I'm just telling people about the quality of time. Here's the thing, though, that when you pass through the needle and you come through the other side, okay, not only is it easier to take your little right turns and left turns and orthogonal zigzags through time, because time is moving in a different direction. In other words, you're now in the current and you're flowing with it instead of fighting it like we've been doing for the last 6,000 years. We pull through it. We're no longer fighting it. We can just kick back on our rubber raft and have a beer and relax for a while. And so suddenly the problems become also more easily solved because there's not this hyper tension that's being caused by everybody intrinsically understanding that they're all running out of time, literally. And even kids have it. And it's happening everywhere. It's really fascinating.
And I'm going to ask you one final thing and related to the time thing, then we're going to take a little break for some network business, and then we'll get back hopefully and talk about more about Kubrick's Odyssey and the films of Stanley Kubrick. But I wanted to ask you about time and about alchemy. Alchemy had been presented as being focused on the idea of immortality and longevity as being one of the principal components of it. And what I want to ask you is in fact this not the case, but in reality, or what we're talking about when we talk about the idea of longevity and immortality when it concerns alchemy, that what they're in fact talking about is the ability to act outside of time, like you have illustrated for us here.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, is it possible to take an orthogonal turn? So you have Joe Johnson, and he's born on one day and he dies 72 years later, whatever, right? And and he went from A to B. That's how we understand time in our world. And then 1 second follows another second, and one thing follows another thing until eventually the whole system breaks down and you die. The alchemist would view it that you have a robust torsion field when you're born, and that through the use of toxins and insults and people who want to hurt you and all the things that are terrible that happen to everybody, your torsion field begins to go out of coherence, you get sick, and you die, and your torsion field dissipates, and then you die. So there's different. So what an alchemist, a really good magician, a person who is just a normal person can do, is you can move outside of time. And you can go and do things that are infinite without appearing to have aged 1 second.
That's
you get what I'm saying?
Yes, that's exactly what I thought you were getting at, and that's why I wanted to ask that question for you to clarify that point.
I'll tell you a little story when we get back about an alchemical, a magic trick that they used to have in the old days, which really shows you this in a really good way.
Oh, that sounds excellent. Okay, well, stick with us, everybody. We're going to take a little break for some network business here, and then we'll be back in a couple minutes to talk some more with Jay Weidner about alchemy and Kubrick's Odyssey and much, much more. So stick with us, and we'll be back in a moment.
No one does UFOs better than the Jerry Pippin Show. Join us Monday night, July 11th, between 7 and 9 Eastern and 4 and 6 Pacific on Inception Radio. Joining us in the broadcast will be Jamie Habakkuk, and we will be talking to Clifford Cliff, International Director of MUFON. And we'll be talking to him about recent events, including rumors that he's going to step down at the end of this month as the International Director. The Committee to Reform MUFON is still putting pressure on the group to open up the Board of Directors elections via the membership. And what about that famous database? Is it available to the public or not? Join us July 11th with your phone calls right here on the Inception Radio Network.
Hey guys, Jamie Havocan here to tell you about Haunted Cornwall FM, which is the UK's first and only paranormal radio show. The show covers a wide range of subjects to do with the paranormal and is always open for discussion and debate and is hosted by John. The show can be heard right here on Inception Radio Network, Sundays, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, for a 2-hour show. Be sure to check it out. That's the Haunted Cornwall FM radio show, Sundays, 3 p.m. Eastern. I'll see you there. Hey guys, your host of Inception Radio, Jamie Havocan here. Remember, Inception Radio is live each week, Friday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, as we welcome a new guest and go over UFO-related news, open up the phone lines, and take your questions from chat and call-ins. 9 p.m. Eastern Time, Friday nights. I'll see you there. Thanks for all the support. Take care. Hey guys, Jamie Havocan here for UFO Mag. Do you want to receive the best writing there is in ufology, the best writers, editors, and flat out the best magazine that ufology can offer? If so, I highly recommend UFO Magazine. You can check it out at ufomag.com. And if you mention that you heard this on radio, you can get 6 issues for $19.95. Check it out, ufomag.com. Don't miss out. And keep up to date on the hottest topics in ufology. For UFO Mag, this is Jamie Havocan.
Imagine no longer being tied down to your computer, but having the freedom to take live talk radio with you anywhere you go. TalkStream Live introduces our first ever iPhone application. The talk shows you follow now follow you, and your iPhone is now the fastest and easiest way to stay connected to the best talk radio on the internet. Let TalkStream Live transform the way you listen to radio. Listen to live talk shows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Mobile talk radio from TalkStream Live. Now available in the iTunes App Store.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Stench of Truth radio show here on InceptionRadioNetwork.com. Today we're talking with Jay Weidner about Alchemy, Stanley Kubrick, and the secrets hidden in his films, and much more. Very fascinating conversation we're having today, and we had been talking about Alchemy prior to the break, and Jay was going to relate to us an anecdote regarding alchemy and time. So, Jay, if you want to take it away from there.
Yeah, you may have heard the story, some people, but it was a famous alchemist, and he was invited into a king to his court to discuss alchemy, and had all the rich guests there and everything. And the king was, I think, irritating the guy, probably, as a person who understands alchemy. It gets kind of irritating to listen to people who think they know everything, especially rich people. And so you sit there, he probably was sitting there very patiently, and then he did his alchemy on the poor guy, and he invited the king to, he got a bowl, and he filled it with magic water, he said, and it was a glass bowl, and he set it on the table, and he invited the king to stick his face into the bowl, and the king stuck his face in the bowl, and he was, his face was in the bowl for about maybe 5 seconds, and the king suddenly pulled his face out of the bowl. He was stricken, looked completely stricken, white as a ghost. Fell down, had to be taken into his room, where they brought in all the doctors and everything, and the alchemist, left discreetly, I'm sure. And the king told the story that he, as soon as he put his face in the bowl, he was in a shipwreck. He was somebody in a shipwreck, and he was young, like 13, and he crashed on a shore, and he barely survived, and he met a woman, and they got married, and they had kids, and he became a shoemaker, and he was old, and he died, and he woke up, and he was pulled his head out of the bowl. And he was so shook up by the experience that he gave up the crown. This is all historically valid story, King of Prussia, and was so shook up by it. And there's many of these stories of a certain contrivances being able to steer a person into a different kind of time. There's a famous story from a person whose name I'm now going to forget. It was a book put out by Loon Panics called, I think, Psychedelic Shamanism, and I don't remember the writer right now, but he's a great writer. It's the only book he turned out. And he talks about a story that he had, I think, under peyote, in which he stumbled, I think, on the ice on a cold winter night, and while he was, pretty high on peyote, and it hit his head, and he had a whole entire life experience. And then he came back, and his friends were waking him up from the fall that he had just had. And he was extremely shook up by the experience. And these stories are abound in everywhere. And this is what's going on, with people like Whitley Strieber, for instance, who's a really nice guy, and I really like him. He's a great writer. But Whitley, he has some kind of ability to take the right turn. And the right turn's associated with brain chemistry and serotonin, melatonin, dimethyltryptamine-like substances, which can create a more dynamically coherent field via the pineal gland, and you can steer your vortex, your torsion field. You can actually steer it. And those are the people who take right turns. Sometimes you're steering it all the time, mostly just going with the flow. Yeah. But sometimes, in dream states, in meditation, through some shamanic substances, you're actually able to take a turn, sometimes for the worse and sometimes for the better.
Well, immediately, whenever you told me that story, it brought to mind the idea of near-death experiences as well, because they do talk about your life flashing before your eyes in a certain respect.
What that is that's the torsion field folding back in on itself. As the field reaches maximum incoherence, okay, if we're looking down at your spiral vortex that you have around your body, from above, it will be coming down into the center of your forehead through the pineal gland and down through the spine. And if you looked at it from the top, if you're in health, you have a beautiful flower, rose petal-like flowing phi ratio pattern to your coherent field of flow. If you're sick, which dying people are because something happened to them, that goes into incoherence. At a certain point, it reaches a point of incoherence which reaches a havoc point, and that's when you die. And when that happens, it folds in on itself until it just goes up, it pushes itself up through the center of the whole. You understand what I mean? And that's your past lives. Going through as the time vortex begins to unfold on itself at maximum incoherency, it begins to fold in and go back up through itself, and that's the tunnel also. That's going through the donut. That's the tunnel effect that people who have NDEs report. They're going up through this vortex back up into a force that connects us to the larger vortex, which is the Earth's vortex. So it's like there's a vortex, a torus donut vortex of the Earth, which we know by the magnetic fields, and those have little etheric tornadoes which come off of them and come down to the Earth, attracted by, for simplicity's sake, gravitational forces. And that's what you are, and that's what trees and animals and everything that's alive is. It's this connection, this particular connection that we have through the top of our head to a larger field, the Gaian field, the field of life, which is the Gnostic, Sophionic view that we are just aspects of the mind of a planetary goddess named Sophia or Gaia. And in fact, that's what alchemy teaches. If you don't understand the goddess, then you cannot understand alchemy. And the goddess is this living field that we live in. And each one of us are little tiny tornadoes almost of energy that are coming down from this larger field, and we're caught like sparks between this torus field that's coming down from the larger field and the surface, the hard surface of the Earth, which lies at the center of this torus donut. And and when we die, the spark dies, but the little vortex that connects you to the larger field does not die. It just goes back up into the field and becomes part of the Gaian memory. And the memory is supplanted by each person, and so the quest for knowledge becomes the only thing of importance, because as you smarten up, so does the Gaian mind smarten up. And it's a reciprocal system of, and we are the conscious mind of the Earth. That's what humans are. There are no alien gods. There's no gods that are off planet. There's no jealous gods in the Gnostic alchemical viewpoint. There's only a living, breathing system of pure knowledge that is both reflected in nature and inside our minds. And that's why it's such an important thing to understand. And the return to the Gaian mind, you see, the Gaian mind is only as smart as we are.
Well, I'd say that what we've seen, in recent times, we've seen a lot of negativity being dumped into that whole scheme of things, for sure.
Well, I mean, the people don't want to come to grips with the alchemical view. It feels, but in their heart they know it's right, and so they know they're living on, they're walking around on something that's alive, something that reflects reality back at them, that can be shaped. But they have to dump everything out that's spiritual. So it's difficult for people to accept what I'm saying.
It is difficult for people to really kind of grasp very esoteric, what we would call esoteric knowledge, which in fact should be more widely disseminated and more widely known, and should not be in fact esoteric at all. It should be something that should be common knowledge amongst people. If you'll pardon the pun, I think you put a very interesting spin on that entire topic there with time and the idea of the torsion field, and certainly the explanation of NDEs is certainly one for that is food for thought. So that's a very interesting interpretation.
Well, this is also where psychic abilities come from. You're connected to the larger field by this little tiny tornado-like thing that the Hindus called the Sushumna, and it's so small you can't see it. It's like a 400th millionth of a width of a hair, and when you're psychic, or when you're thinking of somebody and they call you or whatever, and you have those moments. What that is that's you, connecting up to the vortex, through the vortex, and coming down into someone else's vortex. You see, and you understand what I'm saying? And
yeah, so it's you're creating like a direct connection between you and them.
Exactly.
Via the connection that you already have, but that we do not realize that we have on a conscious level. And
when you're in love with anyone, it doesn't matter, dad and children, your wife, whatever, what tends to happen is these become knotted together, these fields. And pretty soon you know what everybody's going to say. Everybody knows, you know what I mean. And you're getting these relationships where everybody's reading everybody's minds. And what's going on with the Internet is really fascinating from this point of view, because by everybody connecting like this, we're beginning, without having to worry about the locality, we're beginning to knot together interesting connections of these things, even though their localities are different. And that's on an esoteric level. That's very profound, and I have no idea what will happen from all that.
Well, yes, and I think you're correct. There's something very profound there that could potentially be something that is a tremendous force for good and human advancement. but of course there's always the ever-present idea of its corruption and pollution, and that's something that we always have to fight against, unfortunately, with the various powers and forces at work in our lives today. There's you have to be constantly vigilant and on guard against the type of pollution and corruption that we see enveloping all of these things that have potential to be great human achievements and for the future of humanity. That's for sure. Yeah. Jay, do you have any idea how many more films you're going to be doing in your Kubrick's Odyssey series?
I will say 2 at this point. The middle one might be a little bit long, but I think I have a certain kind of thing I have to get out before I can go to the next step. And so it's a 3-step process, beginning with Apollo. This is the next one we call Kubrick the Magician, and then I'm not going to say what the name of the third one is. That'll be rather the more kind of explosive one. So I'm just seeing how it goes at the moment, and it's going good. So I will probably continue forth. And I would look for it sometime, near the end of this year, maybe earlier if I can get on it.
Well, that sounds really good, and I look forward to the next one coming on in the series. I imagine that your interest in Kubrick started pretty much like anybody's would, and that would be as a fan of his work. Would that be fair to say? Yeah,
I actually had my first, conscious, I guess, or spiritual or religious experience when I was 15, when my girlfriend took me to see the film, and I don't even know what I was before that night, actually. There's a world before that, it's almost I can't remember. It's just, me playing baseball and me going to school and all the things that kids do, right? And then here I was, and I was in the Cinerama Dome, and, there this film unfolded in front of me that it was inexplicable. It was beyond belief. It was WTF, but we didn't say that back then. And, and I couldn't get out of my chair, and the usher had to get me up before the next show. My girlfriend couldn't talk to me. I couldn't hear anything, and I just drove home staring ahead, and, I've never been the same since. And immediately, I wanted to understand everything that was going on in this thing, and, and in fact, it opened up my mind, and I think, to be honest with you, I think that the film is in a way kind of designed to do exactly, or was designed to do to us, my generation, in a way on a mass scale, what Fulcanelli's book did on a more smaller, esoteric scale, and that was to use archetypal symbols of an extremely archaic nature that reoccur within the dream and life pattern of the human collective unconscious. And I think Kubrick consciously remolded all of these things into a film that at first is inexplicable, but as you begin to break it down, you begin to realize what he's really saying, and what he's really saying is that it's possible for a human being to transform itself beyond the mundane, beyond, what you've been trained to do, what you've been told to do. And it's the most optimistic movie of all time. And but I didn't know any of this then. I didn't know what this thing was. But it led me, and I think a lot of other people, out into realms that we've never previously considered. And I think it has a huge effect on popular culture. I know Roger Waters definitely wrote the long song on Metal. The album that came out before Dark Side is definitely the last 17 minutes of 2001, if you lined it up and play it. So people are, it had a huge effect on a lot of things. And in fact, every science fiction movie of any worth has something of 2001 in it. You just have to find it.
And of course, it is a very seminal piece of work, even if you don't go into the deeper esoteric realms of it. But as you indicated earlier, there are different depths to the kind of, if you want to say, metaphysical investigation of the material itself. And much the same.
Yeah, but you know what? We can just throw that all out and just say, okay, so what's this film about? And you know, in the long and short of it, and the answer is pretty easy. It's saying that the human race was created by exterior forces off planet of an unknown origin, who messed with us and changed us into who we are. And then when we got to a certain place in our development, i.e., we could take a rocket across the expanse of space and get to the moon, they left behind an electromagnetic device which was casting out a torsion field, which they discovered, and they landed and they found it, and they didn't know what it was, and it sent a signal towards Saturn. It's Jupiter in the film, but in the book it's Saturn. And they go to Jupiter in the film and Saturn in the book, and they discover another one of these devices, which then initiates the finder into a whole different way of seeing the universe. And he realizes that he's trapped in a cage in a room which he cannot get out, and it's a room, a prison of his own design. And when he realizes that the only way out is through the dense doorway that is represented by the black monolith, then he can get through and seek a new life. And that is what the movie is about. The Shining is about a locality in which unseen forces have the ability to shape the inhabitants of the area to do things that they would not want to do. The unseen forces in 2001 forced the apes into behavior patterns that they would have been reluctant to go into, but now were. And that is what results in the first murder, is the technology itself. So this is the continuous pattern of what he's saying. I think we need to wake up and say, hey, wait a minute. What is this guy saying? And this guy's saying that we're being heavily influenced by forces that we can't see, that we have no control over.
And do you believe that Kubrick himself had firsthand knowledge of this through his connections?
I do. I think he, not just through his connections. I find it hard to believe that Arthur C. Clarke, when he says that he had never heard of Gnosticism when he wrote Childhood's End, which is for sure the book that Kubrick really wanted to make. It came out in 1953, and it is, I believe, the greatest science fiction novel of all time. Taking a look at what is being done and said in Childhood's End is that an off-planet alien race, the overlords, take over every American city on Earth. You know, society has been plundered by everybody since. And they line giant flying saucers, and they come out and they pretty much take over the entire Earth, but they don't show themselves. And they promise to after 50 years. And after 50 years, the overlord, the head of the overlords, reveals himself, and he's about a 12-foot tall guy who looks just like the ancient view of the devil. Mm-hmm. He is the ruler of the world now. He's the overlord, Kurlian. And he then, the next stage of the book is these devil creatures in their super ships begin to suck off the energy of all of the children on Earth until it is completely homogenized and a gigantic whirlwind of life force. And it's drawn off the planet and sucked off, and the whole world ends. The whole world, the Earth crashes in on itself, and everything ends. Because the whole point of everything on Earth was the creation of this vast amount untainted life source. That's what the book's about, okay? And that is a central myth to Gnosticism, that there's this off-planet force that has enslaved us and forced us to live lives that are completely unnatural to the human condition. And they are, they've supplanted the real God with false, jealous, ignorant, war, murder gods, and with whom they call archons, and they are like vampires drawing energy off of the human race. That's the big fear that the Gnostics had in their few scant texts that we have left. And so this is exactly what Kubrick was interested in, what Clark was interested in, what I'm interested in, and this all comes from the Nag Hammadi and the Pistis Sophia and a few of those, like I said, scant texts that have been passed down to us so that we know what's going on. And they haven't been touched by human hand. In other words, we're reading it right as it was written 2,000 years ago. And that's why we like them. And so I think this is things that shaped, I think this kind of thing shaped a lot of what was going on. And it's another continuous thing that even if you go all the way up to Eyes Wide Shut, where Tom Cruise discovers this cult who are, again, invisible. They all hide behind masks. Who are doing what? They're drawing energy off of people, off of, in this case, young beauty queens at these parties. And Tom Cruise accidentally stumbles into it, and it's the leaders of the world. So you begin seeing this thing and this reoccurring theme, and I think you begin to unwind why it's the reoccurring theme.
Well, you did bring up two very seminal or very seminal connection between two of the works right there, and that is between 2001 and The Shining, and that is the work of outside forces, and in particular, in both cases, promoting in the case of 2001, the idea that what the monolith does to the pre-humans is, in fact, teach them how to kill through the technology of using tools. And of course, this is precisely what is going on in The Shining as well. You have an outside force that is influencing Jack Torrance in the movie to engage in murderous behavior towards his wife and kid. And I had never thought about that before, but that is a definite connection between the two films. Is there? Well, I guess there is a particular connection also in Eyes Wide Shut, which is
there's three films.
Yes, which is another one that you have briefly touched on. Well, not so briefly, I guess, in a lot of the talks that you've given. You've talked about this a number of times, and when it seemed like you've just skimmed over it, but Eyes Wide Shut seems to have been like the seminal work for Stanley Kubrick as far as taking it from more of a symbolical storytelling idea to a practical application to the world as we understand it or live it. And that is that there is a direct interface, perhaps, between the outside forces at work in our society, working on people. There's a direct interface between them and the human race via the groups like the one that is depicted in Eyes Wide Shut, and that is these elite occultic groups who are engaging in this type of sex magic and all of these other sort of occultic rituals and what have you. And
let's just go back to the whole thing that I was talking about, then I can wend it right towards the whole enchilada, and that is that. Okay, so you now I've told you that there's this force that is a donut-shaped force. It comes down through you. And when you're young, it's really coherent, and as you age, it goes out of coherency, okay? And you can do certain things to get it in coherency, okay? Well, one of the things that you can do to put your incoherent force back into coherency is sex magic. And what you're doing is you're drawing the energy off of young people who have coherent forces through sex magic. And I don't do sex magic, so I can't really tell you exactly what the mechanisms are, but I think we can all quite well imagine what they might be. And you're drawing those forces in and away from the person that you've brought in. And then whether you believe that this is true, whether I believe this is true, whether you believe this is the most ridiculous thing you've ever heard, I don't think that's really the point. The point is they believe that it's true. And I think when you realize that, you begin to understand a lot of the scandals and things that are going on around us.
Yes, and a lot of them, of course, do revolve around sex. That seems to be the scandal du jour, as it were, for high-ranking people. Well, we just had the Dominique Strauss-Kahn and his particular activities there in New York, and some other things that have come out as well that relate to this. And I think that the fact that there's a great deal of power there as far as the ability to shape people's thoughts and minds when it comes to understanding the mentality of these people, and whether or not you're going to approach it from the point of view of being against them or opposed to them because they engage in some sort of activity that you find to be repugnant or whatever, but also with the idea of what you pointed out is certainly true, and that is that one can imagine very easily how these forces and activities could in fact take place, and why someone would perhaps be drawn to engage in them, because there would be something very specific and fundamental to be gained by the people who engage in them, even though there is a risk, as it were, even if it is a small one, for people who are well protected.
I don't think that risk is getting less and less.
Yes, and it is now.
The trajectory of what they're doing with culture, this is another thing that is on the fringes of the whole research into Stanley and things that is pretty wild. But the trajectory is, of course, that there's a dynamic in the culture, and it's being driven to a specific end or a specific purpose by the mass media. And so then the question is, once you accept that, a lot of people won't accept it, and that's fine. I accept it as a filmmaker, person who was in Hollywood. I can tell you that there is definitely, a flow to the way that you can get something done. And if you don't go in that flow, you won't get anything done, not unless you do it yourself. So I know that's true. And going against the flow will not work, unless in the age of internet it's starting to work, which has got to worry those guys. Anyway, I don't want to digress into the showbiz world, but what I'm saying is that there is a trajectory, and we're going somewhere. And so where is it that we're going? And it's apparent to me that one of the things that they wish to achieve is a kind of laissez-faire attitude towards all forms of human sexuality. That seems to be what they want more than anything else. It's the rock stars that they push. It's the message that they want. It's endless. It's repeated, and they're getting younger and younger, and they're sexualizing the entire youth population. And I can't understand why any responsible leader would ever want that to happen, because that weakens us. Because one of the things that has to be understood is that if you want to really weaken that field I was telling you about, then have a lot of sex. because and what I mean by sex is males going all the way to orgasm. That will weaken males faster than just about any single thing they do. And so isn't it interesting that, males are bombarded with every kind of thing to make them sexually titillated from the youngest ages imaginable nowadays. And so I think this is all part of a kind of a plan to just kind of make us all into extremely highly sexual creatures. And for the life of me, I can't tell you why they want to do that unless it is what Stanley is saying, which is that it's some kind of off-planet or something kind of form of parasitical form or spiritual form. In The Shining, it's a spiritual form. He's enigmatic about it in 2001 as to exactly what it is, and he's concrete about it in Eyes Wide Shut as being a certain group of people. So I guess since he got killed since he died after Eyes Wide Shut, I don't know. So this is where you have to kind of go with this whole thing. And if this is true, and I firmly believe what I'm telling you about these things in these Stanley Kubrick films and what he's trying to say are true, then they were embedded by him to tell a secret story that would be found long after he was gone.
Mm. And I think with Eyes Wide Shut, one could take it a step further. Obviously, the people who are engaged in the various activities in the movie obviously are doing this for some purpose that is beyond what is given to us on the screen. And I think that was another message that he was trying to give there. And that could also be a direct connection to these unseen forces as well. That perhaps he was trying to concretize it in the sense that there are people who are in connection with these unseen forces and attempting to use them for their own purposes or to connect with them in some way in order to gain favor or status or whatever. And I can definitely agree with you when it comes to the hypersexuality thing, and I think that what in fact you're talking about is eventually the idea that having sex with children will be acceptable. It will be something.
I think that's the goal.
Yeah, and
I
it's.
think that the goal of everything that's going on is that they want to make it permissible that you can have sex with children, and that's where we're headed. I would make a prediction that will begin becoming. There's going to be possibly a group of people that kill a person, a pedophile or something, some kind of news event which will be then used to justify that it's hateful to talk against them. And
I could see that. I could see. Yeah, I could see that so much.
That is the goal. That is the goal.
And I'll tell you, when you talk about the idea of energy and your torsion field, as you noted, I can't imagine anything but that when you point out the fact that you engage in sexual activity with people, especially in an occultic situation, that you draw off their life energy. Just imagine the amount of tremendous damage that you are doing on that level to a child that you would subject to such activities. It would be truly horrendous, but I do in fact see that what you're saying is in fact the trend where all this is leading to. And
okay, so then just extrapolate that idea. Now, why not just go all the way here? Okay, and this is where things get really dicey. Why not just extrapolate that end? Once you agree that is very likely the end of all this, the goal of all this, then go back to the 1953 novel Childhood's End, which so inspired Kubrick to make 2001 and work with Arthur C. Clarke, and look at it, what it's saying, and then you will see. It's exactly the plot of Childhood's End.
Yes, that they have the harvesting of children, as it were.
Exactly. And
Right.
it's the kind of thing that when you finally realize what childhood zen's about and why it has never been made into a movie, is because you begin to realize that Arthur C. Clarke has created a situation where the reader is cheering on the complete and total destruction of humanity by the overlords and the sucking off of all the children and their energy, all the prepubescent children, who are the ones who become this energy force.
I think that people, when they read that book, they kind of, for the most part, I think they kind of turn off after the discovery of the identity of the aliens, and I think that may be done on purpose. It's sort of like a way to kind of cover over a little bit what the final result of the book is, and that is that final denouement. There's
which no one ever talks about.
Yeah, they don't.
You can go through every single review,
Yeah.
Websites I have of childhoods, and you will never see anyone describe the book the way I just described it to you.
Yes. And there's always, everybody goes to oh my God, the aliens are finally revealed to be these devil beings, and that's the big secret, and the big overturning. But of course, that's not the end of the story. But that tends to be where people leave it. They don't go on to analyze the rest of it and to realize exactly what's going on there. I think you hit the nail on the head with your examination of those particular things. I wanted to ask you a couple things in particular, just a couple of questions to clarify a few things for me. The way that you have analyzed some of the Apollo imagery in Kubrick's Odyssey, Part 1, Kubrick and Apollo, you have done a really great job of illustrating how these sets and these set pieces have been put together, and you've put forward a really great theory as to how we have so many anomalies and all these other things in the pictures that people have been talking about for years when it comes to this, and that's why we have such an intense interest in the idea of Apollo being faked. And while you don't ascribe to the idea that we never went to the moon, your point of view is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your point of view is that we did go to the moon, but that all of the for public consumption photography that we've been given, or most of it, let's put it that way, it is fake, and it was done on a soundstage. And the idea that you've presented, like in the film that you put together, you talk a little bit about Richard Hoagland's work, and I just wanted to ask you if he had actually had any input after the fact, whenever he looked at your material after you put this together, as far as it related to his own research.
Well, no, he has gone strangely quiet on me. Now, of course, he's coming out and saying that the comet Eleanor is a gigantic spacecraft coming in. So I'm a little worried about Richard at the moment. Maybe, I don't know. I don't want to say any more than that. But at the same time, he's an old friend, and I wish him the best. But I told him about what I was doing a couple of years ago, the last time I saw him. In person, and I said to him, this is my evidence, and I'm showing it, and I just want you to know that I'm using your work to prove that this is all front screen projection. Mm-hmm. And he didn't bat an eye and just looked at me and said, well, of course a lot of it is faked. And so that was that. I have bad news for him. It's all faked, but other than that. And when I say it's all faked, I mean just the shots on the ground. I don't mean the stuff taken from orbit or any of that. I mean just the shots of the astronauts on the ground is fake. And the thing is that people have to understand is that the lunar lander had never successfully been tested. Neil Armstrong almost died doing a test with it on the Earth. So there's never been, in the history of rocketry, a soft landing of a rocket. That is a rocket coming down backwards using its thruster engines to create a situation of having a soft landing. For sure, it's never happened on Earth, but NASA will tell you that they managed to do what they can't do here on Earth 6 straight times in a row on a place they've never been.
Indeed.
And if they had just clipped a little rock, say a foot or two tall boulder, just clipped it on the way in, they would have never gotten off.
That's right.
And it's this whole thing. It just, you start unfolding and looking at it, just becomes this kind of really pretty preposterous event. And the fact that they can't find any of the original footage, and every time that somebody comes out with something, they go scurrying like little rats, and so you can never really get them to do anything. They released the lunar orbiter released pictures of the landing sites in 2009, and I just did a little article. It was just up on the internet on rents.com about how the shots of lunar landing site 15, 16, 17 had no lunar rover tracks anywhere. And they're just well, you can see the footprints, but you can't see the lunar rover tracks. Come on. And you have to wonder, are they complete and total idiots? Do they just don't care what we think? Or are we so stupid that no one even sees the obvious? I don't know which one of that is, but the whole thing is just borderline ridiculous. And one day the edifice will fall. I've heard rumors that, the Chinese and Japanese and the Indians have all successfully imaged everything and know the whole thing is bogus.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised. One thing that really surprises me about the entire moon photography thing is that, regardless of the idea of the Indians and Chinese and everything else, which I have no doubt that they have excellent photography of the moon as well, but certainly the Russians over the years have sent many landing craft and rovers and all kinds of things to the moon that we never hear about. They never talk about them, and there's never any footage that comes out from any of these. And we never see any of this stuff. So it really begs a question as to why. I mean, why wouldn't the Russians be championing the idea of, oh, look, we got these pictures from our lunar rover craft?
I can answer that.
Go ahead.
I can answer it really easy. Go to Google and Google Aristarchus crater, moon, blue dome, Clementine, and you'll see pictures not only that the Clementine mission took, but that an amateur photographer took, which matched the ones that Clementine took, of a gigantic blue dome, which has got to be like gigantically huge, with structure, with symmetry, over the crater Aristarchus.
Yeah, I've seen it.
And that's all very interesting and everything. But what most people don't know, and I think you can still Google this, is that there was a report compiled in the mid '60s called the Translunar Phenomena Report by two astronomers for NASA, and it's a blow-by-blow account of what astronomers from the time of the invention of the telescope all the way up until the time of the report had seen any strange things on the moon, i.e. translunar phenomena.
Yes.
And over 50% of these reports, which are by the most famous of all of our astronomers that have ever existed, what they have said, over 50% of those reports in the report come from the crater Aristarchus. And I think you just have to add 2 and 2 together and say, that either we have a secret space program that was able to build a complete gigantic, huge blue dome over the crater, and people look for yourself because I know you think I'm crazy. Aristarchus, which, I mean, they could have. I mean, it's possible. Or the Russians could have. It's possible. Or it's been there, according to the Translunar Phenomena Report of the 60s, there's been something at Aristarchus since the beginning of man looking into the telescope. And I'm going to have to take the other. I'm going to have to say those little guys that we've been talking about, I think that they must be up there. And that's, and I don't know what else to say, because, I mean, this thing is just, and no one talks about it. Hoagland doesn't talk about it. No one mentions it. It just sits there in front of everyone with no one thing, you know. Like I said, WTF, exclamation mark, exclamation mark.
Well, it's just one more to add to the list of the incredibly strange phenomenon and the incredibly strange nature of the moon itself. And when you actually like just start to look into the moon, just as it is, you'll find right away, as soon as you start digging into it, it's just one anomaly after another. And of course, one has to ask the question, why would NASA commission a report of that nature? What possible use would it have for any manned mission to the moon, unless that bore a direct relationship to what NASA was trying to achieve when they went to the moon? And and of course, people. I never hear people talk about that, though, Jay. They never say, you know, well, they wanted to find out about stuff about the moon. Okay, fine, but why would you commission a report of that kind of nature, of things that they will try to tell you are tricks of the light or things of this nature that don't have any actual validity? Well, why would you put the report together in the first place if it doesn't have any effect on the mission that you want to achieve by going to the moon? Why are you going to do it anyway? You know,
well, you know, that's why I always bring it up, because to me it's a much more important report than the Brookings report that Hoagland always brings up. To me, the TLP report is like, wait a minute here, this is proof they are looking. And then what are they looking at? And you look, oh my God, you know, there it is. Yes. And if you look at all the Apollo pictures of Aristarchus, they're all bleached out, high albedo. You can never see anything. And I, you know, looked at them years ago and said, okay, well, there's nothing there. Whatever they saw in the Translunar Phenomena Report is not there at Aristarchus. But then the Clementine mission, you know, snapped the photographs and didn't release them until the late 90s. And when I saw those, I went over there, you know, I just went, you know, oh my God, you know, and then I showed them to everybody, that, you know, famous people, and, you know, there's like a kind of a, oh, we're not going to go in that direction kind of thing. So, I don't know.
Well, it's certainly a fascinating discussion. I wish we had more time to actually go into it some more. But as is usual, whenever I have my guests on, particularly fascinating ones like yourself, Jay, the time flies by and we're quickly running out of time here. Is there any particular project that you're working on right now that you might want to promote?
Well, I've got a number of projects. I got a film coming out, hopefully this year at some point, called The Alchemy Code, which is going to be a discussion of a lot of the things I discussed here. Okay. And then the second, Kubrick's Odyssey, and I'm working on a feature film with actors. I'm trying to make a feature also. And, so it's a big juggling match at the moment, but it pays to keep busy at times like this.
Okay, and besides jweidner.com, is there another website where people can find information on you, or is that the best place people can go?
That's the best place. Sacredmysteries.com is where is our film production company. We have films on all the things we're talking about, the luminous body and alchemy, and if you're interested in that kind of thing, then go in there. The Alex Gray Art Mind and Healing the Luminous Body and Secrets of Alchemy, and there's just all sorts of things that are about that science, the science of the luminous energy field.
And you also have a YouTube channel under that name as well, Sacred Mysteries.
That's right. Got a free channel with over 300 videos on there, and all sorts of famous people.
Yeah, I can recommend the YouTube site. I've watched many of the videos that are on there. They're very good. I can also recommend Kubrick's Odyssey. It's a fascinating piece of work. And for my money, Jay's particular take on the anomalies presented, especially using Richard Hoagland's material, is a better explanation for what you're seeing than what Hoagland offers. That's just my opinion, though, so you can judge for yourself if you get the film. Anyway, I want to thank Jay for being with us today. Jay, it was really fascinating talking with you. Hopefully I'll have a chance to chat with you again in the future. I think we could probably do 10 shows like this and talk about this, because it's all of it is such fascinating material. And I just want to thank you again for sharing your time with us today.
Yeah, well, just remember, it's all one big picture.
Indeed it is, and you've helped, put that into focus for us today. So thank you very much for joining us, and hopefully we'll talk to you again in the future.
All right.
All right, have a great evening. Okay, bye-bye. Okay, that was Jay Weidner, and again, you can check him out at jweidner.com, and you can also check him out on YouTube at Sacred Mysteries. That's a channel on YouTube. Lots of good videos on there for you to look at. And there are many articles on his website that you can read about, and I can highly recommend Kubrick's Odyssey, Secrets Hidden in the Films of Stanley Kubrick, Part 1, and I'll look forward for the next one coming out. So that'll do it for today's show. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to thank all the people in the chat room, and I want to thank Jamie Havikin, producer and switchboard operator over there, for running everything so smoothly for us today. And I'll bid you a good night, and I'll see you next week for another show, 2 hours of great discussion. So join me then. Until then, bye-bye.